Good evening and welcome aboard here on WPRI.com for its version of Dan Yorke State of Mind. Some good news. Looks like we are en route to bringing the television show back for original programs sometime next week, most likely Tuesday. We'll keep you up to date with that program note, but at 7:30 on MyRI TV and Fox Providence at midnight, we will be getting after it again, and I'm looking forward to that. So stay tuned. Good thoughts. So we had a preliminary phase one opening discussion from Governor Raimondo today, and it was pretty detailed. It looks like the retail world come Saturday will be open for minimum browsing. The formula they put together is, well, I don't know how people are going to adhere to it, but we'll see how it goes. You know, one person for 300 square feet. If you do the math on that, the size of a hotel room would be the place for just one person. Inside a tiny little store, I guess it's going to be one person at a time. But you know what? Figure it out. Do the best you can. I doubt there'll be enough business regulation police around to bust too many horns here, but it's all about consciousness for social distancing. And again, I applaud the governor and the Department of Health for their consciousness and their execution on many of these health issues. Not so high marks on some of the business matters, but we'll talk about that in a moment as an example. But the restaurants will still, for the most part, be on their takeout level. They are going to be able to add some to-go cocktails, which may seem small, but you know, the price of a cocktail, and there's a margin there. Remember, restaurants have a small margin on menu items and a much larger item, I should say, margin on the booze. So, you know, that helps. So if you want to have your favorite Mai Tai to go, maybe you ought to just order it at the restaurant. In the meantime, for the most part, although we get a phase one, it's going to look the same. Right? We still have social distancing at maximum 5-person levels. That's a challenge. You still can't go to church. You can have a ceremony with no more than 5 people involved. And I guess we'll get a clarification tomorrow as to, does that include the clergy or not? But funerals have been bumped up to 10 people maximum on site. And that's nothing to quip or joke about or really focus any negative attention on. This is the tragedy of COVID-19. Way too many of those services for both those who are suffering from the disease and just the life cycle. We really have, it's been a beautiful spring day today, but it's been a time of mourning. And, you know, the better we can do right now with a social distance responsible family get together in the loss of a loved one, the better for everybody's difficult quality of life. In the meantime, it's pretty interesting that we are getting into the nuances and the nuts and bolts of phase one by keeping a lot of the restrictions in place, some of which make perfect sense, some of which make no sense at all, including this 14-day restriction on travel. Now, the governor is the most strict on that. Other states don't have that specification. It's getting a little weary for those of us who have out-of-state travel to do, and certainly on this Mother's Day weekend, if you have family in Massachusetts, and I do, it's going to be very difficult not to want to just pop up, but you can't right now. I mean, you can't get together. There's no hugging and kissing going on with people you haven't seen in a while anyway. But, you know, Mother's Day's a big day, and so it's going to be more Zoom and WebEx and Cisco and FaceTime and whatever else you got out there for a platform to celebrate Mother's Day. But at some juncture, quicker than that, she's going to have to make some more specific definitions about travel. Otherwise, she's just going to have a rogue population that's going to be going back and forth over the state line regardless of what she has to say, right? We got her to lessen up on this silly notion that if you live in East Providence but have a dock or a supermarket in Seekonk, that you'd have to go and come back and quarantine for 14 days. That makes absolutely no sense, and she finally figured that one out. Let me give you an example. Big golf world development today. In Massachusetts, Charlie Baker said, go ahead and play, but the restrictions are very, very tough on the Massachusetts golf courses, both public and private, and for a reason. They're still struggling with this COVID-19 at a level. And of course, many of you are part of our community and live in Massachusetts, so let me not treat you as some foreign adversary. And that's kind of the theme here anyway. Massachusetts seems like it's a couple of weeks behind what Rhode Island has been in terms of the golf course opening restrictions. In Rhode Island, the governor has opened things up. You can now ride in a cart if by yourself, unless you have a family member that you've been living with, and then the two of you can share. So that's a restriction that has been at least more than partially lifted, helping the golf courses' revenues and also people who, aren't physically able to walk golf courses. That's a plus. The restrictions on when you can be in the parking lot and going to the golf course have changed as well. You can practice now at social distancing levels, both 12 feet on the driving range and only 5 people on the putting green. And so that has gotten better. Locker rooms aren't opened. Restaurants aren't open. But it's a slow pace back to some kind of normalcy. But the story of the Pawtucket Country Club is an interesting one. I've played there many, many times. I am not a member. I am a member at another club that has some of these same challenges. And that is that Massachusetts residents who are members of that club are prohibited with this restriction the governor has instituted from coming and playing and wanting to pay the dues to the club that they're members of. I mean, at some point, your loyalty to your club goes away when you can't do anything at it. And the business of the Pawtucket Country Club is an interesting one because 65% of their membership live out of state, meaning in the neighborhood. Interestingly enough, more than half of the golf course is in Massachusetts. There are people who live by the 3rd and 14th holes who are members of the Pawtucket Country Club in Rhode Island who live in Massachusetts. And they can't play there under the restrictions. Inasmuch as you can go to the dock or the supermarket from East Providence to Seekonk, the Seekonk resident or the Rehoboth resident or the Attleboro resident or the, I think you get the point, ought to be able to, if they are a member, come and play and then go straight home. In New Hampshire, they've solved this. They've got travel restrictions there as well. But if you are a member of a New Hampshire golf course, you ought to be able to come across the line, do your thing, play your round of golf, enjoy the fresh air, say goodbye, and get out of Dodge. The governor's tunnel vision on this stuff, her lack of perspective from her commerce secretary, who should have had this thing fixed, along with the restriction release, her lack of delegation of small business things, this and so many others, are coming home to roost for her. On the health issues and the Department of Health, we give her high marks. But this, she just doesn't get that there is rationale for adjustments. And if it doesn't fit into her brain, it seems like it just doesn't compute. There's just so much anybody could get into their brain in managing this COVID-19 crisis. So I'm going to continue to talk about that. The Pawtucket Country Club is close to going out of business, which will be devastating for the city of Pawtucket on an aesthetic and on a business basis. And it just doesn't. She wakes up every morning saying that she thinks about business. She goes to bed thinking about business. Well, think about how ridiculous this is. And this could be for a half a dozen golf courses throughout the state that have people who come from out of state who are members. I'm not talking about guests. I'm not talking about visitors. I'm talking about people who have long been paying dues members of the facility. By the way, the marinas are full of Massachusetts cars. People are members at the yacht clubs. They have their boats there, or their boat clubs, whatever. They've got their boats there. Now, why can you come in and tend to your boat from Massachusetts, but you can't come in and play a round of golf in the fresh air from Massachusetts? I mean, we're all in this thing together, COVID-19 issue, and what it really requires is some kind of coordination between the two state houses to say, hey, listen, we're a shared neighborhood down here. Let's share some solutions. And I'm hoping that dawns on this Raimondo administration as early as tomorrow as we get ready for opening weekend, phase 1. Thanks for checking in. We'll be back with you here tomorrow night at 8 o'clock when we post at WPRI.com. And again, we'll be back on the television, it looks like, sometime next week. Stay tuned, as they say in the business. Good night.